Speed changes. In Resolve, you can control the speed of your clips in multiple ways, and Resolve makes it really easy. To activate retiming for any clip, just right-click and select Retime Controls, and you have these arrows appearing on top of the clip. And there's a number down here. Currently it's 100%, which tells you that this clip is currently being played back at a speed of 100%. And you have this arrow here that reveals many more options. Let's first perform a basic speed control operation. I'm going to open the drop-down menu and go to Change Speed. And for example, let's select 200%. Notice that the clip got a bit shorter, and the clip now is being played back at double the speed. Take a look at her hand now, how it moves at double the speed. Let's undo. Go to the drop-down menu again, change speed, and now let's select 50%. So the clip now got longer and is being played back at half the speed. Take a look at her hand now, how the clip is being played back at half the speed. Let's undo. Notice the arrows here. If I open the drop-down menu again and change the speed, for example, to 200%, notice that the arrows are getting closer to each other. This means that currently this clip is being played back at faster speed than normal. Let's undo, and again change the speed now to 25%. Notice that now the arrows are further away from each other and their color is yellow. The yellow color means that due to the fact that this clip plays back at a speed that is slower than normal speed, Resolve will need to create new frames in between in order for the playback to look smooth. To make this more clear, I'll go back to speed change and change the speed to 10%. And let's go back to the hand section and notice that now when I play back, the playback is not smooth at all. There are missing frames in between. That's because Resolve needs to repeat the same frame multiple times to avoid having black frames or empty frames because the frames of the clip are further away from each other. Let's undo. Now let's add a simple speed point. To add a speed point, simply place your playhead at the point in time where you want the speed changes to start, and now go to the drop-down menu and select Add Speed Point. Nothing changed so far, but Resolve now is going to treat these two sections of the clip as different clips when it comes to speed. There are two ways of controlling the speed now. First, you can control the speed through the drop-down menu here. Notice that every segment has its own drop-down menu. So you can open the drop-down menu on any of the segments and change the speed of this segment, for example, to 50%. So now the speed of this segment is 50% and the speed of this segment is still 100%. Another option is to drag the controller itself. I can move it to the right, reducing the speed. Take a look at the number, how it changes once I move the controller to the right. Or I can move the controller to the left, making the speed of the clip faster. So for example, let's go back to 120% and notice that the speed here is changing. Note that when I moved it to the right, once the speed gets lower than 100%, now we get the yellow arrows, which means that Resolve doesn't have enough frames to play this at a lower speed than 100%. Note that the controller only controls the segment on the left, so the segment on the right is still the same speed. I can change its speed through the drop-down menu. So for example, I can make it faster, for example, 200%. And I can add as many speed points as I want. So for example, let's place the playhead here, open the drop-down menu, and add a new speed point. And now I have a new segment. And this controller now controls the speed of the segment to its left. So now I can change the speed of the segment in the middle here through this controller. Let's undo everything. Then we have freeze frame. For example, I want to select this image once she holds the cup and go to the drop-down menu and select freeze frame. Now we have a new representation here, this orange segment. This means that this segment is frozen in time. Let's take a look. I'll place the playhead here and notice that now we have a freeze frame. And we can change the area that is being frozen by changing the start and end points. The start point will change the frame that will be frozen. If I move it, now I can select the exact frame to be frozen. So for example, I'll select this particular frame. And the endpoint will change the duration that this frame will be frozen for. So I can freeze it for a longer time or shorter. Let's undo. Then we have reverse segment. I can click on the drop-down menu here and select reverse segment. And now if you look closer, the arrows now are inverted. They're pointing to the left. This means that this clip now will play back in reverse. Let's take a look and notice that we're playing the clip in reverse now. Let's undo. Then we have rewind. I click on the drop down menu, select rewind, and for example, select to rewind at a speed of 100%. Let's zoom out a bit. Now we have these two new controllers. These controllers allows us to select the segment that will be reversed. However, notice something very important. On this controller, I have two handles. So let's say, for example, that I want to start the rewind when she actually holds the cup, which means that I want the rewind to start at this point. However, the controller is here. So I simply need to move the controller from this point to this point. However, if I select the upper part of the controller and move it to the left, notice what's happening. I'm changing the speed of the segment on the left, making it faster, which is not what I want to do. So let's undo. To move this controller here without changing the speed of the segment on the left, I can hold the controller from the lower portion and move it to the left. So for example, let's move this to the right here, move this to the left. So once her hand gets to this position, I want everything to be rewinded until this point. So notice that now when we play, that when her hand gets to the cup, she rewinds and then we get back to the normal footage. Notice how Resolve achieved this. If we zoom in a bit, this clip now has 3 segments and every segment has its own controls. So the first segment is playing back at a speed of 100%. The second segment is playing back at a speed of minus 100%. So it's reversed. Notice the arrows. And finally, we have the final segment that again plays back at a normal speed of 100%. So what Resolve did is simply to reverse the segment in the middle. Let's undo. Now let's discuss the retime process. I'll go to the drop-down menu, change speed, and I'll change the speed to 10%. So let's zoom out again and notice that when we come to this point, the playback is very choppy because Resolve doesn't have the required frames to fill the gaps between the frames that are spread out now. To deal with this, I have multiple options. I'll select the clip, open the inspector, and if I scroll down, I have a section for retime and scaling. This is where I have multiple options to deal with retime processing. If I open the drop-down menu, I can select between nearest, frame blend, and optical flow. The best option is optical flow. If I select it, now Resolve will render new frames in the middle. So Resolve will actually try to create new frames in the middle between the frames of the clip in order to fill the missing frames in between. So for example, let's come back to this point and notice that when I play, even though it's 10%, Resolve is trying to smooth out the speed changes as much as it can. Now, of course, it's very hard because I'm using 10%. But for example, if we switch now to 50% and we play at half speed, notice that now the playback is much better. Again, let's change from optical flow to project settings. And now we're back to the choppy frames. However, if I select optical flow now, and I play, it's much smoother because Resolve now is creating new frames by analyzing existing frames. Note that optical flow is a bit hard for playback, so you might need to render the segment in order to see it in real time. And again, optical flow doesn't work all the time. It works most of the time, but it still has its limitations. Let's undo everything. Another option we have is speed ramping. I can click on the drop-down menu here, select speed ramp, and select up from 0%. Let's zoom out. And now Resolve created different sections in my clip. Every section is being played back at a different speed, and the speed is increasing from one segment to the next. So this section is being played at 10%, 30%, 50, 70, and 90%. This is designed to make the clip go faster over time. It might be hard to see with a long clip like this, so I'll simply undo and I'll trim the clip a bit. So I'll trim it from this side and from this side. And now let's zoom in and again go to the drop down menu, speed ramp, and select up from 0%. And now this should be much easier to see. See how the speed is increasing over time once we play it. Let's undo, and we can also go to the drop down menu, go to speed ramp and select down to 0%. And it's the same thing, just in reverse. So the clips will become slower over time until it stops. Again, let's take a look. I'll place the playhead here and notice how the clip is getting slower. And these were the basics of speed changes in DaVinci Resolve.